Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. It is March 21st, 2023, and I'm here in Denver, Colorado, the Mile High City, and I'm waiting to deliver at Kroger/King Soopers. Yeah, so it's been a minute. I've been kind of, I don't know if maybe demoralized is the right word, but certainly displeased with how things have been going. I am now up to 3 TNT trainees that I've tried to get on my truck, and none of that has worked. The last 2 were actually, for some reason, prohibited by some dude in training in the training department at Salt Lake City. No justification was given, so my fleet manager knows about it, but I actually was going to be home this past weekend for St. Patrick's Day, but I delayed that because I was hoping to pick this dude up that was basically just going through like a PSD refresher, but then I was told, and this was while my fleet manager was out of town, and the JV was manning the controls, that I couldn't train this guy, but no reason was given. I'm a little suspicious actually, because this is 2 in a row that for some reason the training people in Salt Lake City said, oh, you can't train this guy, and kind of almost threatened the trainees. So I'm not sure what's going on there, but it kind of stinks. Anyway, so I'm just going back to the East Coast. I need to be home a couple of times in April, so I'm just gonna head back that way. But anyway, so today's the 21st of March. Guess what? It's the first day of spring. That doesn't mean a whole lot. I came through Wyoming yesterday. I picked this load up over in Utah. I came through Wyoming. It was, the window was open, so I ran across 80. The roads are kind of tore up just from the winter they've had. But it was mostly above freezing the whole time. So, I don't know. I think there's a storm coming in, though, maybe tonight or tomorrow sometime. So, today is the anniversary of what is called the Cornerstone speech, or the Cornerstone address, that was given in Savannah, Georgia on this date in 1861 by a guy named Alexander H. Stephens. Now, you may not recognize the name Stephens, but Stephens was the vice president of the Confederate States of America. At this point in 1861, the Civil War had not yet begun. There had been, some states had seceded, and the Confederate government had been formed, but there really wasn't, there hadn't been a lot of military engagements. There had been a few skirmishes and stuff like that, but basically it was still status quo. And Stephens, as the vice president of the Confederacy, gives this speech called the Cornerstone speech. And this is important because this is one of several speeches given by leading Confederates in the antebellum period, so the period leading up to the war, that talk about slavery as being the reason for the secession of these states and the reason for the creation of the Confederacy. And I want to quote, I'm gonna read a rather lengthy, I got on 2 sides, quote from this speech, although you can find the whole speech online. And again, it's called the Cornerstone Address or the Cornerstone Speech. And I'm gonna there's some sub quotes that I'll indicate in here, but these are all quotes from Stevens's speech. He says, "The new Constitution has put at rest forever all the agitating questions relating to our peculiar institution. African slavery as it exists among us, the proper status of the Negro in our form of civilization. This was the immediate cause of the late rupture and present revolution. Jefferson, in his forecast, had anticipated this as the, quote, rock upon which the old Union would split," end quote. And that's a quote of Jefferson by Stevens. Stevens goes on to say, "He was right. What was conjecture with him is now a realized fact. But whether he fully comprehended the great truth upon which that rock stood and stands may be doubted. The prevailing ideas entertained by him and most of the leading statesmen at the time of the formation of the old Constitution were that enslavement of the African was in violation of the laws of nature, that it was wrong in principle, socially, morally, and politically. It was an evil they knew not well how to deal with. But the general opinion of men of that day was that somehow or other, in the order of providence, the institution would be evanescent and pass away." Now, before I get to the rest of the quote that I'm going to give, I just want to say, so when Stevens refers to the new Constitution, he's referring to the Constitution of the Confederate States of America. And when he says the old Constitution, he's actually referring to what is also now is still the U.S. Constitution. And then let me see if there's anything else that I should elucidate. But basically, Stevens is like, hey, all these guys, all these founding fathers, these originalists, the people that wrote the Constitution, they were wrong. Stevens goes on to say, those ideas, however, were fundamentally wrong. They rested upon the assumption of the equality of races. This was an error. It was a sandy foundation, and the idea of a government built upon it. When the storm came and the wind blew, it fell. Now, Stevens goes on to justify African slavery by making this argument that, like, scientifically, whites are superior to blacks. He says this, our new government, meaning the Confederate States of America, our new government is founded on exactly the opposite ideas, meaning the opposite ideas of the U.S. Constitution. Its foundations are laid, its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in the history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth. This truth has been slow in the process of its development, like all other truths in various departments of science. So there it is, folks. Anybody who says at any time that the Confederacy and secession of states and the Civil War was over states' rights is ignorant, ill-informed, and or a liar. And they're also a racism denier. Okay? Stevens's words, and by the way, words of many of his contemporaries, make it very, very, very clear that the South, the Confederacy, was based on African chattel slavery. It was based on an underlying premise, a cornerstone of white supremacy. That's it. The whole states' rights argument bullshit, that came up after the Civil War. There is absolutely, and I've read tons of these speeches by these fucking traitors. There is absolutely nothing in their speeches that talk about states' rights. Stevens, after he got out of jail after the war, he tried to take back what he said, as did a bunch of other people. And that's when the myth, and it is a myth, of the Confederacy, of the lost cause, started to come about, right? These guys realized that they were wrong. And they tried to cover up what they did. They tried to cover up their treachery and their inhumanity. And really, you know, they were never held to account, and that's unfortunate. But they cannot run from their words. These guys were white supremacists. They were racists, and they used every means to justify their evil. So, you know, I've had people, you know, I mentioned some stuff about, you know, Fort Bragg, right? And somebody, you know, some people started commenting, oh, the Army's changing that name because of political correctness, or, you know, canceling people. And then some other people chimed in about, well, you know, they had the right to secede, and, you know, this was about states' rights. That's all fucking bullshit, okay? Let me be very clear. If you say that shit, you're a fucking moron. And you're probably, like, semi-racist, okay? Because you're trying to justify the unjustifiable. But let me just clear this up, because people like to watch my channel for history. But history is about the truth. And the truth is the Confederacy was about one thing: preserving the institution of slavery. That's what it was about. And, you know, all these guys that said otherwise after the fact, it's a lie, it's revisionist history. These guys were scumbags. And you know, the fact, I mean, honestly, you know, I think they were not dealt with nearly as harshly as they should have been. I don't really care. You know, they were criminals. And let me say this about secession, okay, since I'm on that topic. You know, there are some dumbass politicians, including like Nikki Haley and some others, who think that for some reason a state can secede. So here's the deal. I know Nikki Haley doesn't fucking read the Constitution, but I've read the whole damn thing. I also read the whole Bible, and it doesn't say slavery's, you know, slavery's not biblical either. But nowhere in the Constitution does it allow for secession. Nowhere. Nowhere. Everybody that ratified the Constitution agreed that they couldn't secede. And then, as Antonin Scalia said in an interview, he's passed away now, he said, somebody said, well, what about secession? And he said, well, I think the Civil War pretty much settled that. But if it didn't, there have also been Supreme Court cases that did. And here's the other thing that you should know about the Confederate States of America. Every one of those states had to be readmitted to the Union. So you know how, like, Texas says, oh, we've been a state since 1845? That's actually a fucking lie, okay? They were a state from 1845 till they quit, till they tried to leave in 1861. They were not reinstated. So, like, you know, like, these states basically quit, lost their, I guess I should say, lost their seniority, and then came back into the Union. But it's disingenuous. Like, they were all like, okay, can we come, I know we quit, but can we come back, please? That's what happened, okay? So, if you got a problem with history, tough. But if you say that the states that seceded did it because of states' rights, you know, go somewhere else. And by the way, all these other people that talk about like, oh, I want part of Oregon to move to Idaho. I want part of Northern California to be its own state. You know what? Kiss my ass. If you don't like the United States of America, then leave. You know, that's what these people are saying. If you don't like this flag, then leave. You know what I say? You don't have to like the flag, but the Constitution's the law of the land. If you don't want to be here, if you don't like how things are, leave. You live in Oregon, you don't like the fact that Oregon has a left-leaning, state legislature, move to Idaho. But you ain't taking a part of Oregon with you. I don't think that's what's going to happen. In fact, I know it's not. Right? Leave. Go to Oregon. Move where you want to move. But don't try to change the rules after everybody had already agreed to them. So that's my history lesson for today. I think you can tell that it agitates me when people throw out just their fucking racist bullshit to justify evil, and justify these guys. They're all scumbags. They're all traitors. And I'll be glad when every stinking one of them is in the dustbin of history and we've renamed all these military posts and all, ships and buildings and everything. We need to erase them from view. We need to cancel them. Why? Because they're traitors, right? They took up arms against their country. They're the same as somebody that joins Al Qaeda and fights against U.S. soldiers. They're no different, no different. And they just got off the hook. They got off easy, and that's unfortunate. I think we should have punished them. I think we should have locked people up, hung people, and maybe today there wouldn't be so many people sporting Confederate flags and stuff. If you say, oh, that's my heritage, well, then your heritage is racism. Okay? Sorry, it just is. Facts are ugly sometimes. So let's talk about trucking. Big merger today announced. KNX, Knight-Swift Holdings, is purchasing U.S. Express. I didn't see this coming actually, but I'm not sure I love the premium on it. It's like a 4X premium. But I have a lot of respect for Dave Jackson, who's the CEO of Knight-Swift Holdings. And by the way, I've said this before. I've met Dave. I've met a lot of the senior leadership at KNX when I was at Knight. They're very nice people, friendly. They really do, I think like the drivers and stuff. And this is going to be great for anybody that works at U.S. Express that's a driver, I think. Things are going to change, but what Knight did when they brought Swift into the fold is, first of all, get rid of a lot of all the debt that Swift was carrying, but also install best practices, and and kind of trade people back and forth. If I were working in Chattanooga internally at USX, I might be a little concerned about my job, but I don't think drivers have anything to worry about. Obviously the variant thing is a failure. Obviously U.S. Express was not doing any better. The interesting thing is the end of the quarter's coming up, and I don't think U.S. Express was going to get it done. They weren't going to turn a corner. So I know I promised never to talk about them again, but I like talking about KNX. And by the way, I don't think the U.S. Express brand is going to disappear. I think it's still going to be around. And that would be consistent with how Knight has done with other companies. Like when they helped, they brought Swift in, right? They didn't get rid of Swift. Swift is its own entity. Same thing with Abilene. Same thing with Bar None. Same thing with AAA Cooper, the LTL company that they bought. So, there are probably things in USX's, portfolio, in their assets that are of value to KNX. there's a little bit of a hole to dig out of. So I don't know, I didn't read the press release, but so I don't know if they're considering this accretive to earnings immediately. But the interesting thing is the market likes it, because the last I checked a few minutes ago, both USX and KNX stock is up substantially. USX stock is like quadrupled in value today, but which wouldn't be surprising that a company that was getting bought by a bigger, more a bigger, better company, that their stock would rise, right? Because the stock's going to get bought, so you got an out if you've invested in them. But the fact that KNX was up probably about, I don't know, like 5-6% today means the market actually likes the deal. So it's not just the folks at KNX that like the deal, because obviously they like if they made it, right? But the overall market likes the deal. I think you're going to see more consolidation. It's just the nature of the business, right? Big trucking companies are kind of like the railroads were 40, 50 years ago. I mean, 50 years ago, so if you don't know, CP, Canadian Pacific, and Kansas City Southern just merged. So now there's one less North American Class 1 railroad than there used to be. But if you think about it, 50 years ago, there were probably 40 big railroads in the United States. And just comes to mind Santa Fe, right? Santa Fe and Burlington Northern. They were two big ones. They've merged. Southern Pacific, which merged into Union Pacific. Penn Central became Conrail. Conrail was broken up. So that industry is more mature than the trucking industry. So you may see in the next 20 to 30 years, when people say mega carriers now, that's going to pale in comparison with what's out there. It wouldn't shock me to see carriers, OTR carriers that have like 50,000 trucks, like Schneider and JB Hunt are huge, but huge parts of their business, like they have become logistics companies, and I don't really even consider them trucking companies, even though they're in the trucking space. And the reason I say that is because railroads move huge amounts of their tonnage. JB Hunt has a contract with BNSF and I think CSX to get to the East Coast. And then JB Hunt this year started running all their western stuff, most of their western stuff, through Union Pacific, and then another agreement with Norfolk Southern. But I think you're going to see just more and more consolidation. So if you're at, and the reason I mention all this is because if you're at a company like Knight, like Swift, and that company sells stock to their employees at a discount, which KNX does. Like when I was at Knight, once you'd been there a few months, you could start buying stock at a discount. And I think they did it right from payroll deduction. That might be a good idea, right? Because there's a whole bunch of people that own KNX stock that are seeing a nice bump today. So if you're a younger person and you're at one of these companies and they're offering to sell you stock at a discount, it's probably not a bad move to buy it at a discount. Even if you were at a company like US Express, where their stock price was very low, it would still be worth it, because if you were getting it at a discount, you're just kind of taking a flyer. And somebody that was doing that, I don't know if USX had that program, but they're cashing in today. Their stock's going to get bought for way more than they paid for it, or they're going to get converted at that much higher dollar value to KNX stock, which is going to be good. KNX is not too shabby. They pay a dividend, so you know, I think there's a lot of people that are going to benefit from this merger, and you know, it's just and there'll be, I predict by the end of the year there'll be some other blockbuster merger, you know, where somebody with over 1,000 trucks gets absorbed, and you know, the big fish keep getting bigger, and you know, it's just the nature of the free enterprise and the market. It's just how it is. So that's capitalism at work. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging with me. I appreciate all my subscribers. You know, if my history lesson today offended anybody, hey, unsubscribe, quit watching, go somewhere else. I don't care, because the truth is the truth. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.